Welcome to the PerfWeb podcast, hosted by Basha.
Good morning and welcome to PerfWeb 99 Day 2, which really should be Day 3 or Day 4 by now. But nevertheless, couple of things. I sent a note out on the YouTubes apologizing for the scheduling mishaps, but it has been, we just had an explosion of cases. We were operating on a deficit for our group of the number of cases that we had been doing. People were on vacation and spring break and whatever else they were doing. And they came back, and seemingly we took 3 weeks of deficit, and we're trying to make up for all of that in 2 days. So it has been a little bit hectic, a little bit crazy, but nevertheless, I realize all of you have lives too and clinical schedules, and you have to plan and everything else. In fact, I just talked to a young lady in Virginia. Hopefully you're watching right now. And if you are, please say hi if you can on the chat or whatever you want to do. But that you make you're taking time off too. And so I do apologize for it. I'm sensitive to it and I understand it. But of course, there's just times when there's just nothing I can do. And it's a harsh reality of doing live programming. Now, you know, if I'm out of town, you're at a meeting, you don't have this as an issue to worry about, but we're, you know, trying to do this in the virtual world and doing it for convenience sake. So good morning, Derek. So keep that in mind. I do apologize for that. So with that said, I'm going to get started. I've got my mega hat on today, my Make Education Great Again. You can't say Make Perfusion Education Great Again because it's then MPEG. I guess I could do MPEG. I guess that would work. I'm not sure, but it's a mega hat instead of an MPEG hat. Let's get started with our opening remarks if we can, and jump right in. If you'd like to reach out to us, you want to send us an email, you'd like to have a topic covered, you'd like to give a lecture, you'd like to be part of the programming in any way, whether it be as a virtual guest, or if you'd like to come here and join me in the studio, you're absolutely welcome to. It would be so great to have that kind of involvement. We certainly have found people who like doing this in this way. So don't be shy. You could reach us at contact@perfusioneducation.com and just send us an email about anything you want. Okay. And here is our call-in number. In the event you're driving, it's 832-239-5358. That's 832-239-5358. And you can call. We've got a phone line. You can be live on the air. You can discuss anything you'd like with me, whether it be germane to the topics today or about anything else. And I'll tell you this about the topics today. It's going to be interesting. The first talk is, fairly, routine in some ways, Z-BUF. Okay. We've talked about, we all understand Z-BUF. I think that I have some really good insight into how it works and why it works and what we should be doing for it when we do use it. I think it's also not used for everything that it really should be used for, but there's a debate that's going on. There's people who are so anti-ultrafiltration, those that are very pro-ultrafiltration. It would be a fantastic debate to have two super, super smart academic people and with me moderating, which would be great because I am not biased. I'm on one side, but I would try to be objective as best I could. But have a real heated debate about that because people are passionate one way or the other. Z-BUF is a little bit different. It's not really just, you are using ultrafiltration, but you're zero-balance ultrafiltration as opposed to just plasma water removal for some other reason that you're doing it. We can talk about that during the actual lecture itself. If you look down at the bottom, intermittently, you will see that scroll bar that you see now kind of going along this way. Sorry, that way right there. And it's got all of our social media stuff. You can go on there. You can subscribe to our channels. Hey, Francis was able to make it. Hey, fantastic. Francis from Virginia. Thank you so much. But you go on there, like, follow, share, do all that stuff with the social media stuff. And our phone number stays up as well. We also have a critical care app for perfusionists. Now, this is appropriate for not just perfusionists, but for critical care docs. It would be appropriate for ECMO specialists. It's appropriate for even nurses. It also there's a standalone app that you can get within the main app, which is the larger of the two. This is $2.99 on Apple or Google, so really affordable. And it has everything in there from perfusion, so you can do perfusion quick calcs, get all of your information that you're going to need for your flows that day, your predicted crit, your BSA, all of that stuff. And then you can do ECMO. You can calculate how long your E-cylinder tank is going to last. If you have to go on a road trip, you can calculate your DO2, your DO2I during the case. If you think your oxygenator might be having an issue, you can calculate the oxygen transfer rate. And all of these formulas are contained within this app. And then, of course, for the nurses, there's the IV drug calculator, drug and dose calculator, which is both a standalone, but it's also incorporated in the main app, so you could do both. But this one here as a standalone is only 99 cents. So these are very affordable apps, and we put a lot of time, effort, energy, and money into it. I need to sell about 1 million of them in order for myself to retire. I'm not close to that yet, but I'm getting there. Okay, next on the list, our podcasts. You want to listen to our podcasts? Especially the ones where we have discussions with a lot of people on the panel and people calling in. It is kind of fun because we can really challenge each other. And I like controversy. It's what I like. I like opposing views, and I like strong, professional, polite, respectful debate about various different things. I think that that's how we come to consensus. That's how we learn. That's how we take other things that we may not have thought of into consideration. But our podcast, whatever your favorite podcast software is, platform is, you can find us by going to PerfWeb Podcast or PerfWeb, and it will pop up, and you can listen to us at your leisure, driving in the car, stuck in traffic, whatever the case may be. All right, next on the list. We can. I think that's probably not unwise. You know, we have a look, ECMO. This is a totally different subject, and I'm so sorry I'm getting off the topics for today. But nevertheless, our ECMO, adult ECMO specialist training course is, one of the things, along with this program and the programming that we've been doing all this time, probably one of my, most things that I'm most proud of, really. But the course is approved for Category 1 CEU by the ABCP for my perfusion colleagues. It's approved for Category 1 nursing credits. And through, I think, the Northwestern Division or Northeastern Division. I can't remember exactly who the accrediting. No, the Oakstone is the CME. And it's approved for, but thank you, it's approved for AMA PRA Category 1 CME. That's through Oakstone. So it's a very well vetted course. It is accepted as a course that you can use for taking your ELSO Adult ECMO Specialist Certification exam. Now not endorsed by them. I want to make sure I'm clear on this. Okay, the program, when you send everything in, you do your application, it is accepted as long as we continue to meet their criteria. And in the past, we have met all of that criteria. So we are totally separate from ELSO, have nothing to do with each other. But the course uses what are their guidelines to make sure we teach what they say is required to be able to take their certification tests. It's 4 days long, 2 days of didactic done virtually, and then 2 days of simulation that are done here in Houston. at Memorial Hermann, the Woodlands Hospital, in their beautiful conference center. It's incredible. It's really incredible. And it's trained by people that really do know ECMO, very well-versed, well-experienced, great educators, great facilitators in the simulations, with a simulator and with an ECMO circuit, and a patient simulator, everything. So we have a lot of stuff. I'm very proud of this. I would look this up. Now, we can also come to you, do the virtual course, and then also come to you in order to do the simulation. But there's a minimum number of students, obviously, you have to have in order for us to go do this there. But it is a very worthwhile course, and I'm very proud of it. Okay, thank you very much for bringing that up, David. All right. What? Tomorrow? Oh, thank you so much. And tomorrow's course is at 4 o'clock. Now, I'm not on call tomorrow. I'm going to finish this today. I had to go do a case this morning. I'm going to go do a case this afternoon, and then, or an ECMO. Actually, I'm covering an ECMO. And then I'm going to do a case tomorrow. So I moved the integrating the CRRT machine into the ECMO circuit and understanding how that works with all of the various different pressures. Why do you get alarms? How can you hook this up? What happens when you hook it up one way versus the other? Because it's really interesting to see how a change in one pressure over here, which could even be the patient, has such a profound difference throughout the entire circuit and then to the CRRT machine. They're two separate circuits running as one with a patient. So you almost really have three circuits. And two of them have fixed volumes. One of them has variable volume, or the ability to have varied volume, right? So it's really interesting to see how it works. And we have a great simulation way of showing that in the simulation format with all of our cameras in the studio and all of the tools and so forth. It gives you a good idea of what you're going to see if you come do our ECMO course. So that's it on that. So 4 o'clock, 1600 hours Central Time tomorrow. Okay. Anything else? That's it? Okay, we can go ahead and get started. Ahmad, hey, hi, everybody. He says, hi, everybody. Hi, back to you. Okay, so we're going to talk today about Z-BUF. Now, I don't have a slide that says this. I'll just say it. I have no dog in the hunt, no financial interest in anything involving this. I have no relationships with any companies that are involved in hemoconcentration or hemofiltration or CRRT or anything else. So I have absolutely no financial disclosures to report to you. So we've all heard the saying, and there's a whole different ways. There's a bunch of different ways that it's been quoted, but water everywhere. If you're at sea and you're a sailor, but not a drop to drink, because of course, if you drink salt water, you're going to die. So that's something to take into consideration. Hey, Magic, can you do me a favor? I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but can you help me out? Can you take my phone and figure out? I'm so sorry, everybody. All of these text messages, and here, let me unlock it for you. And if you would please, let these people know that I'm in the middle of a show and I'll call them back. Okay, so you're doing a case, and they take the aortic cross clamp off, and the heart just sits there. It's nice and relaxed. It's not stuffed. It's not doing anything. It's just laying there, right? They put pacer wires on. Surgeons sometimes they take a pickup, and they tap it. They tap it, nothing. They put pacer wires on, and you get pacer spikes, but there's still nothing. And everybody's like, well, what's the potassium? That's what they usually always say, right? So you send a lab, draw a lab, you send it, or you run it on the iStat, or you run it on the GEM, or you run it on the Siemens Rapid Point, or whatever blood gas analyzer that you use. And here are your labs. pH 7.40, PCO2 is 40, PO2 is 340. Man, you guys are doing, this is a great, that's a great gas, right? Bicarb is 24, base is 0, Sodium is 140. Potassium is 8.6. And the glucose is 116. Well, we know why the heart's not moving. Everything else about this gas is absolutely perfect, but that's a pretty high K. So what gives? What's the deal? And what do we do? What do you do for this? Well, your choices are to give glucose and insulin because the sugar's not high, so you're going to have to give an amp of D50 and give some insulin, or you could use Z-BUF. And I think most of us probably at 8.6 are probably going to Z-BUF that patient as opposed to the glucose insulin trick, though that works. But it takes time for it to work, and of course it's a transient thing. We're going to talk a little bit more about potassium shifting as we kind of move back into. You can just keep it. Thank you. As we move on through this lecture. But the question you have to ask yourself, of course, if you're going to choose Z-BUF, is do I have a hemoconcentrator already in line? And or do I have one even available? Where is it? Do I have one in the hospital? Because that's another. This is of course, not really part of this lecture per se, but it is somewhat connected. There are places, as I said, this is a very hotly debated topic of ultrafiltration. I am unashamed, aggressive hemoconcentration user and believer. However, and with that said, I'm totally opposed to wrapping. I think wrapping is the second worst thing that any perfusionist can do. But I had a chance opportunity. We invited a person who published an article, and I am so sorry I can't remember her name right now. But the article had to do with they didn't wrap either, and they didn't ultrafiltrate. They didn't either, and they had great outcomes. And she showed her their outcomes, and she came on and talked. And one of the things, the takeaway message from her lecture, well, she wasn't here, but she did it virtually, but regardless, the takeaway message from her lecture was that they all worked together as a team. So anesthesia controlled very significantly the amount of volume that they gave, plus their patient population was one that was pretty good. Okay. I mean, I think better than the ones that we see here. We have a lot of patients who have chronic heart failure and they're quite sick, been in the hospital a long time. There's a lot of things going wrong with these people, that their fluid balance is all messed up. These were mostly same day admits or day before, and they're being operated on, and they're good candidates. So, but they worked cohesively together. Anesthesia restricted the volume that they gave, or they gave the appropriate amount of volume, because you are going to have insensible losses. You have to manage all of this going on with the patient. The pump circuit was minimum prime. They used vacuum assist on their cases, and the surgical field was very diligent about sucking into the pump sucker severely diluted blood, and which is basically Kool-Aid that fills your reservoir up, and now you have all of these, and it's ice cold sometimes, and it's very problematic when I see that happens. And you see the patient's blood pressure get all over the map. There's an enormous reaction when they do that, so I get very upset when they do that. And I mostly control it as best I can, but sometimes I don't see it, or they think it's funny, and frankly, I don't. But regardless, that's what happens. So nevertheless, if you are a believer in hemoconcentration, I am, and it's appropriate. I don't hemoconcentrate when not appropriate, but I hemoconcentrate pretty much everybody in our practice. It is practice dependent. That's my point that I'm trying to make. So do you have a hemoconcentrator? Is it in line? So you've chosen the Z-BUF, and which zero-balance ultrafiltration. How does Z-BUF actually work? What fluid do you use? And what will the secondary effects of Z-BUF be? Because there are a lot. So here is a hemoconcentrator in line, okay? And you see blood going in, blood comes out, and ultrafiltrates here at the top, and it's going into a waste container, and that can drain either just by passive transmembrane pressure, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, and just forcing it out, or you can apply a vacuum to it. But there's reasons you do, and there's reasons you don't do that, and you have to understand how the system works. So in order to make that determination of what you want to do. But if you're trying to remove large amounts of water in a short period of time, you're going to want a very high transmembrane pressure, and you can apply some vacuum to the effluent, which will speed up the removal to a significant degree. But this article here, published in the Journal of Extracorporeal Technology back in 2014, shows a Z-BUF circuit. And so you have your venous reservoir going into your centrifugal pump, or if you use roller pump, goes into your oxygenator. This is your oxygenated blood returning to the patient. And here is your little side port line going up to your hemoconcentrator, coming back and returning to your venous reservoir. This is your venous blood, of course, coming from your patient. And then you have a dialysate fluid, a fluid that basically has the constituents of what you want the plasma water to look like. That can be, and frequently is, NaCl 0.9. And there's a problem because that's readily available. It has no potassium in it, very common fluid that's used for this. But there's a lot of problems when that's the fluid that you use. And we're going to kind of get into that as we move forward here. But anyway, that's the basics of how you can do ultrafiltration. And I want you to remember something looking at this diagram, because my next talk on my near misses, which is really fun, scary, but fun, is looking at this line here, because that plays a role in one of my near misses. So I do want you to pay attention to that and remember that for our next lecture. So here is your circuit. So you look over here to the left and you see the sodium, the potassium. This is what I just showed you, bicarb. The lactate was 2.6. Hemoglobin, and that's, not uncommon to see on cardiopulmonary bypass. There are perfusion deficits that occur, and that's a fairly common thing to see, a little bit of an elevated lactate. Hemoglobin on this patient is 7, which I think is way too low, but it is what it is. And you have 2 liters in your reservoir. So there's your venous reservoir. There's 2 liters in it. And you have that same thing you just saw from that picture, going from your arterial line right here, going up into the hemoconcentrator, back to the top of your reservoir, and here is your hemoconcentrator in line, and here is your effluent here. So now I'm going to take a pause, and I'm going to challenge everyone here, and you're going to be able to give me your answer, whether it be on the YouTubes or whether it be on FaceTime and X or LinkedIn, any of whatever the program is you're watching us on, you can answer. And I'm going to give everybody plenty of time to answer, because I'm going to talk a lot through this as we're moving along. Anyone who gets this right is going to win a very special prize. And we give good prizes. That's all I can tell you, is we are known for giving good prizes. However, if you are in Canada, based on the last time I had to send something to Canada, you get a gift certificate sent via email because the cost of mailing anything to you all way exceeds the cost of whatever it is I send, and I give good prizes. Okay, moving on. Why is the return line on any dialysis filter that you'll ever see, hemoconcentrator, why is the return line blue? What is the name for that's question one. What is the name for the pressure between the blood phase of the hemoconcentrator and the effluent side of the hemoconcentrator? There is a name for that pressure. 3, name 2 ways you increase the rate of effluent removal. 4, what is the molecular weight cutoff of the hollow fiber pores? So these are microporous, right? You see that these are the fibers right here, the little straws. The blood is on the inside. Whatever comes out, the effluent, is on the outside of the fibers. That's what comes out the port, okay, that you get rid of. And the pressure within the pores in comparison to the pressure outside of the straws, inside versus outside the straws, has a name. What is that name? In this particular scenario that we're looking at right here, if you remove 1 liter of plasma water from the blood, what are the values of sodium, potassium, bicarb, lactate, and hemoglobin within the effluent fluid right here? So you're going to remove 1 liter of this fluid. You're going to bring the volume down to 1 liter. Okay, half of it's going to be gone. That 1 liter of water, plasma water, will be over here. Okay? So, again, what's the sodium, potassium, bicarb level, lactate, and hemoglobin within this effluent fluid? Now, there's a bonus question, which is going to be good for an extra. It gets 2 points. So when we add all the points up, assuming the patient has a total blood volume of 5 liters, including the 2 liters in this reservoir. So you have 2 liters here, 3 liters in the patient. What will the new hemoglobin of this oxygenator be? Right here, this volume, the volume in here. And the patient, what will the new hemoglobin of that patient be if you take 1 liter off, assuming 5 liters of total volume? 3 in the patient, 2 in the reservoir. Okay? It's basic math. I know y'all are going to get all of these right. So I'm going to give you another few seconds to kind of go through that. Let's see. Francis, 3, increase flow and increase resistance in the hemoconcentrator by clamping pressure out. You got one of them right. Francis, you got one of them right. You might win with just 1 point. I hope not. Somebody else better say something. And Magic, you have to tell me if they say anything on the other platforms, because I can't see those. I can only see the YouTubes. Okay, so we're going to give, okay. So while we're doing that, let's think about some things. So Francis is exactly right. As if you have a higher, if you increase the resistance here, you will increase, and I'm not going to tell you the name of the pressure because you have to figure that out, but you'll increase that pressure and fluid will come out this way much faster to a point. Because if you have too much resistance and very low flow, especially if you have a vacuum attached to this, you can so super concentrate it that there will be no more flow through there. So you'll be removing nothing else. You'll actually go the opposite direction of what you were intending to do to begin with, which was increase the amount of plasma water removal. So increasing resistance is fine, but you can't do it and sacrifice good flow. There is a balance between the two that you have to accommodate. Okay, so I'm going to start with, why is the return blood blue? Nobody's answered that question correctly, so I'm going to tell you. If you have a sample of blood and you just look at it, most of the time you can look at it and say, yeah, that's red. That's oxygenated blood. But if you have a patient with a higher hematocrit, the color is darker. And I've seen it where I have actually looked and gone, is the PO2 okay? Is the everything okay? And you notice that the blood gets darker. Well, the more hemoglobin, the higher hematocrit, higher your hemoglobin, the darker the blood will appear with the same saturation and PO2. And that's why the return line is blue, because it has been concentrated. This is concentrated, and this is diluted. So concentrated blood with the same PO2, same saturation, is darker, and that's why the return line on dialysis is blue. Number one. The name of the pressure. Did anybody get it? The new hemoconcentrator is now reverse colored. Yes, for the ones that you buy from LivaNova and stuff, they did. But the dialysis, if you go into any dialysis unit, CRRT machine, anything like that, you're going to see that the access is red, the return is blue. And that actually is the reason for that. But you are correct, Francis. The new hemoconcentrators, the one we get from LivaNova, now has blue to red, even though we're pumping arterial blood in it. But they did make it a little more intuitive, I think, for all of us. But that is counter to what we normally see. Okay. The name of the pressure is transmembrane pressure. Your transmembrane pressure has a direct effect on how fast ultrafiltrate plasma water will leave the fibers, go through the pores, and fill your effluent canister. With the understanding, TMP, magic, you got it. Good job. With the understanding that, so you get 1 point. So with the understanding that if you let it, you can make it high, but you have to remember, you've got to maintain flow. You must have flow. Without flow, you won't be removing anything. So there, again, you can't forget that balance. What is the molecular weight cutoff of the pores of these straws? It is, see, all remember in pin minus PO2 divided by 2 equals TMP. PN, that's right. Very good. Francis, you get bonus points. Francis is really determined to win something today. We owe you something anyway. Francis was so kind. I appreciated that you took time off, and we screwed up this whole schedule. I know we really affected you, and I am sorry for that, but we're going to make it up to you. You're getting not just a prize today, but we're going to send you something for your troubles. We appreciate you. So it is 50 KD. 50 KD. So 50,000 Daltons or 50 KD. And that's a relationship of size, right? We all understand that. I don't need to get into that. But with that said, does anybody know what the size of albumin is? Because all that's going to come through here is plasma water. So what is the molecular weight of albumin? Okay. It's 65 KD. So 65,000 Daltons. So albumin does not come out of hemoconcentrators because it is too big. That's the reason. Now, they have high cutoffs hemoconcentrators that'll go up to about 60,000 Daltons. But you're talking about plasma treatment therapy, like if you're doing therapeutic plasma exchange, where you have a filter that will remove, or a hemoconcentrator that will remove plasma. And then you can even hemoconcentrate the plasma and you can run it through, like, well, CytoSorb is whole blood, but they have the Mars system, I think it's called, the molecular adsorption recirculation therapy, where you remove the plasma, you treat the plasma to remove the really big inflammatory mediators that exist that are bigger or protein bound, and then you return that to the blood, hemoconcentrate it to remove the plasma water for excess fluid removal or ionic manipulation, acid-base manipulation, whatever the case may be, and then return it to the patient. It's a little more complex system. The CytoSorb may be a little bit easier because it's a single pass whole blood treatment for the same thing. It seems to have really gained in popularity. But again, I understand that's another topic, but it's worth looking into if you do get patients who have severe inflammatory response syndrome. Okay, now comes the fun part. If you remove 1 liter of plasma from the blood, anybody want to answer this? It's an easy one. It's easy. Okay. You have 7. What's 7? The last 7? Assuming 5 is, what will the new oxyhemoglobin? No, you're wrong. You lose 2 points. Our audience is wrong. So they're guessing back there. They're wrong. You're wrong. Sorry. With that said, there's hypotonic, there's hypertonic, and there's isotonic. And there's hypoosmotic, isoosmotic, and hyperosmotic. The ultrafiltrate that you remove is isoosmotic, meaning the sodium, if it's 140 in the blood, it will be 140 in your effluent. If the potassium is 8.6, it will be 8.6. If it's bicarb is 24, it will be 24. Your lactate's 2.6, it will be 2.6. Your hemoglobin is 7, but the hemoglobin in the effluent is 0 because, again, you are only removing plasma water. Now, if I remove the 5 liters of blood volume, what will assuming 5 liters of total blood volume, what will the new oxyhemoglobin be? Okay, Magic, what did you say the answer was? Okay, for if I remove 1 liter. Okay, you are correct. It will be exactly the same. So there it is. So your sodium, but your hemoglobin will be the same. Now, no, I'm sorry. You were wrong. Let's go back. You're messing me up. If I remove 1 liter from this, see if I can pick a different color. You're messing me up, dude. How do I get the color to change? I can't. If I remove 1 liter from this, my new hemoglobin is actually going to be 8.4. Why? Why is it 8.4? Because I have removed 20% of this patient's blood volume, but only the water portion of it. So I have concentrated down my reservoir volume from 2 liters to 1 liter, 2 to 1 liter, which is 20% of the total of the total blood volume. My hemoglobin was 7, 20% added to that, 2 7s are 14, is 8.4. Does that make sense? Magic? He's processing. Okay, did that make sense to everybody else? Yes. Okay, very good. Now, if we go back and we add 1 liter of sodium chloride to this reservoir, we're going to bring the hemoglobin back to 7 because we just added the liter of plasma water back. So now we went from 4 liters of total blood volume back to 5. The sodium, and these are hypothetical numbers, right? Blood volume might be 7. I'm doing 5 liters for simple math. But because a liter of sodium chloride has a sodium of 154, we're adding sodium to the patient. Your sodium goes to 144. Your potassium will go to 6.8. Your bicarb is going to go to 19.2, meaning your pH is going to drop. You're going to be acidotic. Your lactate is going to go down, and your reservoir volume will go back up to 2 liters. So you see over here what it was, and now these are your new numbers, what it is. And that's it. So per liter, sodium has 154 milliequivalents of sodium, 154, that's 0.9 sodium chloride, right? So normal saline. The osmolarity is 308, so it's slightly hyperosmolar, but not a whole lot, but some. The pH range is 4.5 to 7, and any pH adjustment is done by acetate, not bicarb. That's why when you use 0.9 sodium chloride, your bicarb goes down. Now, what we do is we add sodium bicarb. Each 1 amp of bicarb has 50 milliequivalents or 50 mLs, but it also has 50 milliequivalents additional sodium. So you'll notice as you're giving bicarb, because this patient is going to need probably 2 amps of bicarb. If you look at the bicarb deficit formula, you have 0.2 times the weight in the patient. I'd have to give you the patient's weight times the base deficit gives you your bicarb deficit. In this particular case, it's probably somewhere around 98. So you're going to need 2 amps of bicarb. That's with 1 liter of saline, depending on the patient's total blood volume. In this scenario, this one where we're using a 5 liter total blood volume. Again, it's probably going to be a little higher than that. So these numbers are going to be a little more dramatic, but not a whole lot. It's not going to be a lot. So that's going to get your K to 6.88. But there's a problem with that. The next 20% drop is going to be less than that. And the next 20% drop will be even less than that. And then somewhere along the way, somebody has been given probably some insulin. So you're going to get some potassium move back into the cell, right? Insulin does that. Bicarb does that too. Sodium will do that. So you now have a picture where you have an adjustment to your potassium, and you might see it fall really fast and dramatically and go, oh, I'm going to be great with just 1 liter. But then all of a sudden, and Thomas discussed this in my conversation with him today, it's right back up again. It goes down to 6.8, and you're like, oh, that's great. And maybe even 5.6. Oh, that's great. And you turn around and it's 7.4 all of a sudden, or 7.5, maybe 7.6. It's moving right back up again. And that is because you're doing this sodium chloride. You're increasing the sodium load. Your sodium is going up. It's now 152. You've been doing that. You've given 2 liters of this. You've given 4 amps of bicarb. Everything is a mess. Your glucose and insulin is all over the map, and potassium is shifting intracellular, and then it is coming back out again. So you have this roller coaster of potassium over the course of time. And that can be very challenging when you are using 0.9 sodium chloride to manage what was an 8.6, which is a fairly dramatic, pretty high potassium. You're going to want that to get down quite a bit. Now, one of the cases that we do, now you can do these other things too, right? You can use 0.45 and add bicarb to that. That's going to reduce the sodium load. So half normal has half the amount of sodium in it. And then you can also use calcium and magnesium, and you can do all of these fancy things. But there is, at the end of the day, a much better way to do this that I think just works much more effectively and much more smoothly. But again, it requires you taking the time to go find this stuff in your facility. I'm sure if you do CRRT in your critical care units, they will have this fluid. Now, they may not have the fluid you want, but they will at least know what this fluid is, okay? So let me go back to this and delete all of my markings. There you go. Okay. There you go. Okay. I hope that was clear to everyone. I hope. So here's the formula. Here's the fluid. There's a variety of fluids. Again, remember I said I had no dog in the hunt. So I don't care whether it's Duosol, next stage this is Braun. Next stage has a fluid. Gambro, Baxter Gambro has a fluid. There's fluids, all kinds of fluids for this, right? But the one that I like to use is the one that's on the top here in red, 4551. It has a 35 bicarb, so you do get a little bit of metabolic alkalosis, but that resolves itself fairly quickly. It's got 0 potassium, so sodium is 140, so I keep my sodium level exactly where I want it to be. I'm removing it, and I'm replacing it. Your potassium is 0. Your calcium is 3, so I don't end up hypocalcemic. My magnesium is 1, so I don't end up severely hypomagnesic. Chloride is 109 at normal. Lactate is 0, so you'll help to clear whatever lactate you might have. Now, sodium chloride is going to do the same thing because it doesn't have lactate in it. It does have potassium in it, but it's got a lot of sodium. It's got a lot of chloride. You got to take that into consideration. Your glucose is going to be at 100. So we measure it in deciliters. So it's 1 gram per liter or 100 milligrams per deciliter. And then your bicarb, again, is going to be 35. But they have a bunch of other fluids. They have the 2K 3 calcium. They have 2K 0 calcium. Now, why would you use 0 calcium? Well, they use the 0 calcium during CRRT when they're doing regional anticoagulation. One of the pumps that they use on the CRRT machine, which I'll show you later, I'll show you tomorrow, you can add citrate to that. And so if you're giving citrate, you don't want to use one of the fluids containing calcium because obviously you're trying to decalcify it to keep it from clotting. You give the calcium back to the patient in a different central line away from your dialysis circuit. So that's how you manage the patient's calcium versus regionally anticoagulating the CRRT circuit. And it works very effectively for patients who cannot be anticoagulated. So that's the reason for using that. They also have a 30, that has a 25 bicarb. The reason it has a 25 bicarb is because citrate metabolizes into bicarb. So your bicarb will go up when you're using citrate, a lot of citrate on any patient. They have a 32 bicarb of the same thing. They have a 4K 3 calcium, and they have a 4K 0 calcium. Oh, just answer it. Oh, I'm sorry. There. Yep. Thank you. All right. So that takes care of that. So there was a very good article. This was written, I believe it was, there it is, 2019. And this came out of I think it might have been the Journal of Extracorporeal Technology. I'm not sure. Yeah, no, Journal of Cardiac Surgery. It says it right there. Zero-Balance Ultrafiltration, Z-BUF, utilizing injectable 8.4% sodium bicarbonate, is utilized to treat hyperkalemia and metabolic acidosis. Now, when they say zero-balance ultrafiltration utilizing the injectable bicarb, is because they're using 0.9 sodium chloride or 0.45 and adding the bicarb, whichever direction you choose to go. People do it both ways, and I realize that. But this was during a time when there was a nationwide shortage of injectable bicarb, and they had to come up with another solution for this. The nationwide shortage of injectable bicarb in 2017 created a predicament for the care of cardiac surgery patients. Given the uncertainty of availability of sodium bicarb solutions, our center proactively sought a solution to the sodium bicarb shortage by performing Z-BUF with dialysate, Z-BUF-D, replacement fluid for patients undergoing cardiopulmonary bypass. Now, I mean, and I applaud them for thinking this through, and I don't mean to sound arrogant, even though I know I'm going to, but I did that all the time. I've been doing this for years with this fluid. I'll show you a little bit more about that fluid as we move on. So in their discussion, hyperkalemia and metabolic acidosis are complications that occur during CPB. Probably not that bad if you do it right. So occasionally it will happen, though. Z-BUF-S, which is using saline, is effective at lowering the potassium, but alone is inadequate to treat metabolic acidosis and often induces metabolic acidosis because of the removal of the bicarb and the ultrafiltrate. Correct. In combination with the 8.4, the injectable sodium bicarb, Z-BUF-S is highly effective at treating both hyperkalemia and metabolic acidosis, and prior to the sodium bicarb shortage was our standard method of performing Z-BUF. Now, I would disagree with them. I do not think it's highly effective at treating severe metabolic acidosis because you run into this issue. Again, it's much more complex because you're dealing with sodium and you're dealing with chloride, and you're dealing with bicarb, and you're having to manage these things, not to mention you're going to affect in a bad way the calcium, the magnesium, the phosphorus, and the glucose and everything else, because none of those things are in that fluid either, right? And so you get hypocalcemia. So now you're having to give boluses of calcium. Now you're having to worry about the sugar. Now there's all these things that are happening when you're using a fluid that has nothing but too much sodium and too much chloride, just no potassium, but you got the bicarb in there, but you added even more sodium. No calcium, no magnesium, no glucose, no phosphorus. Just keep on going down the list. And they have phosphate-containing fluids as well. So standard shortage was our standard method, right? In our experience, this combination resulted in the utilization of over 150 milliequivalents of sodium bicarb per surgical case. So that's 3 amps, which that'd be 3 liters, basically, maybe even 3 liters, I guess, maybe, depending, maybe not. So their hyperkalemia may not have really been that bad. Some people get very excited when the potassium is a little bit on the high side, but that's probably not that much sodium bicarb, given if you were to do 3 or 4 or 5 liters of sodium chloride, even if you added 0.45 sodium, half normal saline to it, you'd be going through more than just 3 amps of bicarb. I can assure you of that. In the presence of sodium bicarb, our institutional allotment of sodium bicarb could not support continuation of this protocol. Hence, in response to this shortage, we chose to use bicarbonate-containing dialysate solution from Next Stage called RFP 400 and RFP 402 as our Z-BUF solution. And that made perfectly good sense. I think that was else is going to be the same 140 and 140, 3 and 3, 111 and 109, and glucose at 100 milligrams per deciliter, as I had said earlier. That's how we measure it here, or how we measure it anyway. So, so with that said, you see that the benefit there, your calcium and your glucoses are going to stay stable, and you're going to be able to remove the potassium. If you're using a 2K fluid, then your hyperkalemia is probably not really that bad. You want to make a big change, you use a 0 potassium containing fluid, 0K fluid. If you look at normal saline, it has no bicarb, it has no potassium, so it will work. It does work, but it has that second issue of you have much higher sodium, so now you're going to shift potassium into the cells. You're going to give bicarb. That's going to shift it into the cells. And you're going to have a situation where your kidneys are going to try to dump that sodium out. And as soon as that's going on, your potassium is going to come back out. And that's why you see this rebound effect that happens very, very commonly when you use this technique. Also, your chloride, which is not good for your kidneys either. Half normal, it's half and half, but then you're going to have to add the bicarb to it. But you probably would be better off. You're probably not going to see as dramatic a potassium shift and rebound. But of course, your sugar is going to drop too. You're going to have to manage that. It's going to affect your insulin production, your natural insulin production. A lot of things are going to happen there. And insulin's very powerful at driving potassium back into the cells, but it too rebounds. Plasmolite A has, and lactated ringers has over 5 of potassium in it. That's not going to work very well. And you can see the rest of it that it has. Okay. And then your bicarbonate has and this is going to be an amp, is going to have 1,000 milliequivalents of bicarb and 1,000 of sodium bicarb. So you can see you drive the sodium up really, really, really fast when you use this. This is what the fluids look like. Now, there are two Gambro, and I don't know about the other companies. Again, I do know Gambro, but here's the phosphate-containing fluid. It's got 1 phosphate, 4K, 2.5 calcium on this one. And here is Prismasate. Prismasate is a dialysate fluid. And but it can be used off-label. It's sterile. It works just as well. It just was not FDA approved, so that's why you're using it off-label. So it's a dialysis fluid, but sterile. And it's used intravenously all of the time. But with that said, there's a Prismasol, which is FDA approved for intraparenteral use. So you can do either one, but this has 0K, 3.5 calcium, and so forth. It's bicarbonate buffered, small amount of lactate, 5-liter bag, 2 compartments to prevent precipitation that you have to mix. And there are 6 different ionic formulas with this particular company, this particular brand. And I don't think I have any more slides on that. No, I don't. So the one disadvantage for perfusionists is that these only come in a 5-liter bag. So you have to pick it up and put it up there and then spike it. And it, if you're, older like me or small, shorter female that's maybe not as much upper body strength, or even male for that matter. I'm not trying to be gender. I'm trying to be gender sensitive now. I'm trying to be more understanding. I'm not trying not to say things get me in trouble, because I don't need to go back to HR if I can avoid it. But it's hard to put that up there. Okay. And so, that's the only real disadvantage, I think, to it. But in a case where I had a potassium of 8.6, all things being equal, I would want this fluid. And if your hospital is doing, I would do 5 liters. I would probably do 3 to 5 liters minimum. 3 liters minimum, 5 liters probably be more than enough to get that potassium completely stable, probably down in the 4.5 range. And your patient would do just beautifully with that. But everything else would be normalized and the patients look so much better. And there's a secondary benefit that I didn't even discuss because it's just not enough time to discuss all of this stuff. And that is, while you're doing this Z-BUF, you are removing inflammatory mediators. If you remember, we did MUF. There's a lot of inflammatory mediators that live in the 5,000 to 25,000 Dalton range in terms of their molecular size. And if you're using convection to remove your plasma water, high TMP, with or without vacuum attached to negative pressure attached to your effluent, doesn't matter. High TMP, high flow, you're going to be convectively clearing. So unlike diffusive clearance, where you only remove molecules in the 5,000 Dalton or less, you're going to remove things up to 25,000 Daltons. And it's going to make an enormous difference because your TNF alpha, your IL-6, all of this stuff lives in that range, IL-1, and it's going to make a difference in terms of removing these inflammatory mediators. You'll see the heart pick up and become even more snappy. Now, it's a transient effect. ultimately, when you stop doing that, you get out of the OR, they go back to the ICU, they sort of go back to whatever their baseline was. But to get out of the OR in the short term until you can get them over there, where, you know, transferring the patient from the OR to the ICU is always where the breakdown in continuity occurs. They do look snappier. I've seen ventricles start to beat a lot better than they were. Everybody gets really excited and happy. So it's a really good technique for a variety of things and reasons. Okay. And I think that's my final slide. Are there any questions? Anybody want to call in? Anybody want to send me a don't send me hateful email, though, because of my opinions, all right? Some of the things are my opinion. And, you know, but this is what I see. This is what I do. I do this a lot. And I do think that, you know, it is controversial. I think that ultrafiltration on bypass is very controversial. There's a large body of data out there that suggests very strongly that it's not only not beneficial, but may cause harm to the kidneys. But there's an equally large body of data out there that says exactly the opposite. And I don't really understand how these passions are running so high on either side and not able to really see this issue for what it really is. But my experience, I can tell you what mine is. I can tell you how my patients do. I'm very concerned about renal compromise or any kind of acute kidney injury that occurs after the cases that I do. I follow these patients. I know these patients do well. And I fundamentally know that ultrafiltration, when done appropriately and for good cause, is a great therapy. Z-BUF, however, is not the same as just ultrafiltration. And I think that it has tremendous benefit that we as a society in perfusion have thus far not really appreciated. And I think that it would be wise for us to do so. That is my view on that. So we're going to jump right in to a talk that I actually got asked by a very dear friend of mine, Anne Gretcho, and they have a meeting coming up. And I told her that I was giving this lecture, and she's like, well, our new Texas Perfusion organization, TPO, would you give that talk there? So, Anne, if you're watching by any chance, here's the lecture, and you could decide whether or not you want me to give this at the meeting or not. But I'm going to share some insights with you guys of things that, you know, a lot of people don't want to talk about. But, you know, maybe it's my age. Thank you. Appreciate that. The audience just piped in. It is. Maybe it's that I'm nearing, you know, retirement. Maybe it's that I'm more understanding that these things happen in probably a lot of our lives. And, you know, and I have been, I will say it again, I'm trying not to be self-serving here. I know that it may not seem that I'm not trying to be. It may seem like I'm very much trying to be, but I've done a lot of cases. I've taken a lot of call. I've worked a lot of places. I've done all kinds of things, and I'm very glad that I did. It mattered. It made a difference. It exposed me to a lot, but it also exposed me to risk. And I think that it's, you know, I've enjoyed my practice. I've enjoyed everything that I've done, but the three cases that I'm going to talk about were cases where I believed at the time that my career may be over. And that wasn't the case. So we'll dive into this. My near misses, I have no disclosures. Now, I'm going to show you this video. Do we have sound? It's I don't know if there's even sound on this, but this is you really need to watch this video and pay attention to it. There's a guy, see him walking in the door. This was real. This really did happen. That's a construction saw. I'll play it again. Look at where the guy stands. Right there, opens the door, closes the door. Right there. That would have been instant death. No doubt about it. So the three circumstances that I'm going to discuss of the cases, the first one involves a bubble oxygenator. The second one involves hyperkalemia. We just got through talking about that. And the third involves ECMO changeout. Okay. So it was 1989, thereabouts. We were doing an otherwise healthy 80-year-old man. He played golf nearly every day. The plan was for a 3-vessel cabbage, 2 veins and a mammary. We were using a Kobe Century heart-lung machine, and we initiated CPB. The roller pump was our main arterial. The Shiley S100, I think it was the S100A, was our bubble oxygenator. And the cardioplegia that we were using was the Buckberg solution, which I think came out in 87, so 89 makes sense. Went on bypass. We had good flow. Everything was going just fine. Within 5 minutes, and it may have been less, but within 5 minutes, the clamp was on. Clamp was on, the heart was stopped. And the reservoir, the arterial reservoir, so I'll explain a bubble oxygenator first real quick. So you sort of use your mind here to imagine that this came out of a article it was published, I think, in 1988 or 89, 87, somewhere around there. But this is your arterial reservoir. So the blood comes in this way. The blood and cardiotomy reservoir comes in here. Your oxygen comes in here. And I call this area the oxygen reservoir. Number 2 is an oxygen sparger plate, which is basically made of the exact same material that the aerator of an aquarium is. The oxygen flows through it and bubbles into the blood as it's coming in. It comes up the oxygenation chamber, and this is where the heat exchanger is. Water comes in here and runs counter current to the flow and comes out here for heat exchange purposes. It then spills over into the arterial reservoir, and there's defoaming sock with a sponge in it that's coated with an anti-foam material to defoam the blood, defoaming agent, and then it fills the arterial reservoir and is pumped out. One goes to the pump, and the other one is for coronary perfusion. So there were 2 outlets at the bottom. And so this is your standard bubble oxygenator and how this one worked. There were several bubble oxygenators at the time, but this is the one that I was using for this particular case. So the blood in the arterial reservoir, which you expect to be bright red, unlike our membranes today, which is a venous reservoir, starts turning dark. It's getting dark, getting darker, and it's not because the hemoglobin or hematocrit's going up. I'm not hemoconcentrating or anything like that. I then hear a loud hissing sound at the halothane vaporizer, which is over here to the right, down low. And we're using halothane as a volatile anesthetic at the time, followed by a loud pop, and the oxygen line connected from the halothane vaporizer to the outlet to the oxygenator pops off, blows off. So my initial reaction was, what the hell? So I, of course, took it and I stuck it back on there. And it seemed to be running but the blood is now getting even darker, and I hear the hissing sound again, and it pops off. Now my arterial reservoir blood is the same color as this picture. It's black. And I know I am in a lot of trouble. So what do? I alerted the surgeon and anesthesia. Everyone was like, what are we going to do? And I thought about it. I was like, I know I have to change this oxygenator. I have to change it, but I'm not going to be able to do this fast enough. We're using a roller pump. I didn't even have an arterial line filter. I was like really thinking this through, going, I'm really going to be in trouble here. This is really bad. And somewhere along the way, I had enough sense to turn the temperature. Now, we normally did use some mild hypothermia, but I turned it down lower. I turned it to cold, 4. Okay, 4 on the cold. It was this old Sarnes bucket heater cooler that had 1, 2, 3, 4 on the cold, filled with ice in the bucket. And then you had 30 degrees, 32, I think 38 and 40 were the temperatures that you could get on the warm side, if I remember correctly. But I said, okay, you got to take the cross clamp off. Take the cross clamp off. They took the cross clamp off, and I told anesthesia, start ventilating. And I came off bypass, clamped the venous lines, pumped the blood, all of it from the oxygenator back into the patient while the surgeon hand massaged the heart in order to have cardiac output. I then got another oxygenator, and I changed that oxygenator out, went back on bypass, and everything looked perfect. It was beautiful. The blood was the arterial reservoir blood was now red. Now the patient was, acidotic, and there were issues. I was still cooling. Yeah, moved the heater cooler. I cooled a little bit more. I got reestablished. I did some gases. I corrected everything. Everything went fine. We finished the case, and the case ended with a positive outcome. Now, I didn't think that in the beginning, because I was like, this patient's going to have, some at least encephalopathy. They're going to have something's going to be wrong with this patient. But that wasn't the case. The patient got discharged home and resumed completely normal activities. And I was very stressed. I was very stressed the entirety of the time from when that all happened until the patient actually woke up, went through their hospital course, got discharged to home, and was playing golf after about 6 or 8 weeks, something like that. After their sternum had healed, they had gone back out and were resumed completely normal activities, went on to have a completely normal life. I don't know how, because this was very problematic, as you could well imagine. So here is a little bit better picture of a Shiley S100 or S100A oxygenator. This is the actual oxygenator I was using at the time. You see here, this is where the oxygen comes in. This is where the cardiotomy and the venous return are. There's an oxygen sparger plate. That thing I told you about, number 2, is right in there. And then it bubbles up. This is your water out. Water in is up there, bubbles up, spills over through the defoaming section in the middle, and then passes through this sock, and then spills into your venous reservoir, filling this up in this area. Everything in the middle of this sock is foam. Your reservoir volume is really just in this area here, the outside and down here. And then it comes out and goes to your roller pump or whatever pump you were using. I think they had the Biomedicus centrifugal pumps at the time, certainly, because I think I used the first one of those in 1979. So I know they had them then. We just weren't using, we were using roller pump. And then straight up to the patient. There was no arterial line filter. Even though arterial line filters were used at the time, this particular place didn't believe in them and they didn't want to use them. And I was young enough in my career that I really didn't have say in the matter. So I was fine with it because I had trained that way. I trained without an arterial line filter. It wasn't something that we had then either. So I was kind of used to it. So anyway, so that's that particular oxygenator. So what happened? What happened was the circuit was, oh no, that's a different case. So what happened in this case was I primed the pump and I primed the pump with mannitol. So and I did not have the MFU of this oxygenator says you must have your oxygen flowing prior to the introduction of any fluid into the oxygenator. That is what the MFU says. Well, I didn't have that. And I primed with mannitol. And this has happened to me. This happened to me before. I mean, this happened many times where I've not had the oxygen on. And this oxygen reservoir at the bottom of the sparger plate or the aerator, bubbler, filled with fluid. And then you turn the oxygen on and it would bubble up back through it and you would see some fluid left behind, but it was usually no big deal. And it would just go on bypass, everything would be fine. But so I had forgotten to turn the oxygen on. I can't tell you how many times before I had primed it. In this particular case, though, the mannitol got concentrated down here. And what it did with the oxygen flowing was crystallized. It got cold and it crystallized in all of the holes of the bubbler, of the aerator, of the oxygen sparger material. And it clogged it. And that's why it failed. And I sent this oxygenator off. Boxed it, bagged it up, rinsed it out, you name it, sent it off to Shiley. They looked at it. They said there's nothing wrong with it. It worked perfectly fine. It wasn't for a little while that I realized what had happened, why that had happened. Now, I was very happy to see membranes come out, but I can assure you of this. I never primed another oxygenator, a bubble oxygenator, without having the oxygen already flowing after that happened. There's takeaway messages there, right? The MFU is written for a reason. We should probably know it and follow it. This was clearly my fault. Thought it would be career ending. Patient did fine. Just call it a near miss. Here I am today. Let's see, that was an 89 plus or minus. So 89, 99, 2009, 2019. So that's 35 years later. I'm still here. I did fine. I made it. Okay. All right. So that's that one. That's case number one. Near miss. Case number two. Now, this is really an interesting one. This is a little more complex. So case number two is a minimally invasive mitral valve through a right anterior thoracotomy without the use of a cross clamp or any other endo clamp, any other device. So it's a technique that I developed and have really refined. I developed it in Louisiana with a surgeon named Gary Jones, and then another surgeon that was there that had joined him and his group, Chance DeWitt. And that's kind of where I started this technique, was there. And then I refined it and got much better at it here in Houston with Dr. Matoyer and with Dr. Maniscalco. So those are the guys here in Houston that use that, this technique. And they really like it because you don't ever touch the aorta. Now, there's some things you have to take into consideration. The first thing you have to take into consideration is, does the patient have AI? If they have AI or anything more than 1+ AI, you can't do this technique. So that's number one. Number two is having the proper instruments. Number 3 is having access to good hemoconcentrators. And number 4 is having zero potassium bicarb-based fluid, which I just talked about in the Z-BUF process, because you do 25 liters worth of Z-BUF on these 20 to 25 liters in order to clear the potassium. So what you do is you get the patient in the room, you position them in the in a right anterior thoracotomy position with the right side bumped up. You cannulate fem-fem. They do their little incision. You go on bypass. They have the atrium, the left atrium exposed. They're ready to open it up to visualize the mitral valve. You give a big dose. You give about 250 to 300 milliequivalents of potassium as a single bolus. The potassium level, now you don't jam it in because it will cause some hypertension. You got to be very careful with that. But you give it in aliquots until you have enough in, and it usually takes at least 200, 250, sometimes 300, depending on the size of the patient and what their renal status is, how high their normal potassium is. There's a lot of factors involved. But basically, you give them enough potassium to put them in diastolic arrest. Your EKG becomes asystole. And at that point in time, they do the atriotomy, they see the mitral valve, they do whatever procedure they're going to do on the mitral, and you have a completely perfused heart. So if it's a redo that has had previous CABG surgery or any other if it was a mediastinal exposure, this is still virgin territory in there, easy to find. And if they have patent bypass grafts, you never interrupt flow to anything. So your heart remains perfused the entirety of the time that you are doing this procedure without ever touching the aorta. So your stroke rate goes way down, as long as you make sure that you have appropriate de-airing and you're using CO2 and all of the things that we do, right? So that's how the technique works. Then when you're done, I usually use 2 hemoconcentrators. I run them in parallel to each other, and I use the zero potassium fluid. So I use Neptunes, and I'm removing gobs and gobs of plasma water, simultaneously replacing it with my zero potassium bicarb-based fluid. And this is what gets the potassium, keeps everything else normal, but brings the potassium down in a nice linear fashion until you get to where you no longer have the heart starts to beat on its own, and you wean from bypass. That's it. You're done. It's a very simple procedure. You can find it online. I think you can look at, we've done a program on it. In fact, you can find it on PerfWeb. We've done programs. I've done live cases where I have videoed us doing the case. So you can actually find it in our library. And I think it's a really cool technique. It works so incredibly well with minimally invasive mitrals. The patients do fantastic. And this is what I'm telling you about with the heart looking more snappy. We see that a lot with this technique. Your bleeding is less. Everything just works really, really well. So I like the technique. But nevertheless, you have to run 2 hemoconcentrators. So there was another hospital with a different surgeon that wanted to do this procedure. And they talked to one of the surgeons that I knew that did the procedure and frequently. And they kind of talked them through their part of it. And I went over there to do the case with a perfusionist that was a colleague perfusionist. We are both within the same group. And we go on bypass, we get the heart arrested. Everything is working absolutely perfect. And they're done with the valve, or at least they're, tying the valve down at this point in time. They did a valve replacement, and we start removing the fluid. But only one hemoconcentrator was put in line at the time for whatever reason. And I'm like, we really need a second hemoconcentrator. So we added a second hemoconcentrator, and I have some diagrams of this so that I can show you exactly what happened. So we add the second hemoconcentrator. Now, somewhere along the way, during all of this happening, we heard an alarm. We looked up and over, and the air bubble detector had gone off. but the circuit was completely primed. There was no air anywhere we could see. But past the air bubble detector was nothing but air going all the way up the arterial line into the femoral artery. Where the hell did that come from? Needless to say, it was horrifying. Needless to say, I was sick. Well, let me show you what happened first. So, as I told you, our circuit had, this is a basic circuit. Now, just instead of having this venous line, let's use a little imagination and just imagine it over here. All right. It's in the femoral vein. Well, I guess that's kind of missing that. I guess we didn't go intra-abdominal, probably not. So here, and the return line post-bubble is going here. So we'll just do that, okay? Flow that way, flow this way, all right? Just for the sake of this discussion, all right? And you're looking at everything. So everything's femoral, and here's your right anterior thoracotomy there to get to the mitral valve. And here's our circuit down by the oxygenator. And you see our one hemoconcentrator in line right here. And our, rest of our stuff that you see is normal. The blood is coming out of the reservoir through the centrifugal pump into the oxygenator, out of the oxygenator, back up through the bubble detector, and then into the femoral artery. And on this line is where we had wired off one hemoconcentrator. So now we need to add a second one. So there's the second one that we added in the same arterial line. Okay. And this is just showing you how the aorta comes down through the, through the arch, down into the thoracic, into the abdominal aorta. And then there's your femoral arteries, your iliacs. And then here's your vena cava coming all the way up. And the venous line was, of course, in here in the right atrium here. Our system was using VAVD. That's also very important for you to remember. Okay. So as we were adding this second hemoconcentrator, the perfusionist was, for whatever reason, concerned. I don't know what the reason for it was, but they turned their flow down. Well, remember I told you we're using VAVD. They turned their flow down here. I opened this second hemoconcentrator up. It started pulling, or the volume was going up this way. There was insufficient power with the reduced flow and what was ultimately too high of a VAVD. And it basically all the way from here, the left atrium that was open, sucked air from here into the ventricle, up the aorta, all the way down, air, all the way into this line right here to the bubble detector and set it off. Now, I figured that out pretty quick. But now what the hell are we going to do? So the surgeon, I had to say something quick, right? The surgeon disconnected the arterial line from the cannula. The cannula could not get filled. It wouldn't fill. There was no blood in the patient's aorta. There was no blood. I filled the arterial line, reconnected it. We put the head down a little bit. I went back on bypass. There was nothing else to do. Patient was going to die. The heart was still open. I went back on bypass. The whole time I went back on bypass, I was like, well, I was thinking to myself, how many years have I been doing this? What am I going to do after this? Maybe I could teach after an experience like this. Maybe that was what I would do, be a teacher. You can't be a clinician, but you can be a teacher. Everybody knows how I felt. I think everybody could probably just listen to this and know exactly how I felt. I was absolutely devastated. Pretty sure this was my last case. The surgery got completed. The patient weaned from bypass without difficulty. Heart was still working. Transferred the patient to the ICU. The nurses kept asking me, why are you sitting in here? I don't want to talk about it. They already knew. But they knew, but I don't want to talk about it. Within 2 hours of being in the ICU, the patient was extubated and asking for something to drink. The patient was discharged to home on day 5 with no discernible deficit. Okay. I'm going to tell you what, ever since that case, the first case was bad, but not that bad. This one beat them all. And I have still never stopped thanking the good Lord, wherever that may be, whatever Lord you want to choose. It doesn't make any difference. But God was on my side, and the patient's side, obviously, probably more so, but my side that day, because I was absolutely sure I'm done. I'm toast. And, you could say, and I've had people say, well, we had another perfusionist here turn the flow down. Yes, but I was the senior person. I was the person responsible. I was their boss, their supervisor. This is on me, not anybody else. Now, that didn't help, but I can't blame that person. All on me. So God seems to tell me a lot, dude, you're okay. It's all right. I've had another 10 years since this event. It's been 10 years. And there's one more. There's another one after this, but it's not that bad. This is the worst of them all. But what did I learn? What did I learn from the experience? Well, I learned a lot of things. I learned if you're working with other people, y'all better be talking about a plan, no matter what it is you're going to do. It's not just that easy. I'm just going to stick another line in here. I'm just going to stick another hemoconcentrator in here. It's no big deal. No, it really has a major impact. It could have a major impact. It had a major impact because we were not on the same page. I was in a hurry. I was trying to get it done quick because we weren't getting the potassium out fast enough. Second thing, don't do stuff different. If you go someplace new, I always use 2 hemoconcentrators. I was like, you know what? I think 1 hemoconcentrator will work. I think we're going to be fine. If we need a second one, we'll put it in. Don't change how you do things. When you find something that works, stick with it. Don't change it. Do it the same. In fact, Dr. Matoyer, great guy. I think all of you have maybe met Dr. Matoyer, but good friend of mine. And he has said, I can't tell you how many times when it comes to a family member that you're doing, or a friend of a family member, or a friend of a friend, anybody that is a special case that you're doing. Don't do it differently than you do your other cases. Do it the same way. Once you, if that's what you should be doing for that patient, what the hell are you doing with all these other patients over here? And he has such a good point. Don't change what you do, no matter the circumstances. When you know what you do works, it's worked all these other times, it's going to work this time too. And so that's the second thing that I learned from the experience. The third thing that I learned was you can drain a patient's LV, left atrium, LV, ascending aorta, transverse aorta, descending thoracic aorta, abdominal aorta, iliacs, femorals, and the arterial line of your pump circuit back to the air bubble detector and refill the patient without any major complications. I just could not imagine that would ever be possible. There's no way a person could convince me that could actually happen and the patient would be fine. Patient left the hospital, didn't turn a hair. Unbelievable. So, and then, whatever you believe, God, no God, some different God, whatever God, there's only one God, but whatever way you choose to pray, the pump God, I don't care. Let me tell you what, man, I haven't stopped praying about that case. I still remember that case as if it were today. All right. We'll go on to the next. Can I take a 2-minute break and get something to drink? Would everybody mind? Does anybody mind if I take a 2-minute break? Francis, question. Would flowing through that now deprimed cannula with an LV vent on would have changed the result from being unable to reprime to prime again? Deprimed aorta, clotted, it worked out. Let's see. Would flowing through that now deprimed cannula with an LV vent on would have changed the result from being unable to reprime to prime again? Now, I guess, I thought I didn't know where the air came from. I thought maybe the air leaked around. So that's a really good question. I don't think it would have mattered. I could have just gone back up bypass. I don't know if putting the head down did help or not. Might have, maybe. Imagine it did. We did what we did, and it seemed to work. And I guess there's some level of intuitiveness that says, tilt the head down, makes sense. But I thought it leaked from around the arterial cannula site. That's what I thought, that the flow went down and it sucked the air both of them came from atmospheric air, but nevertheless, I thought it had come and trained it in from around the cannula site and come back. So I had no idea in the beginning, none, that the entire aorta was void of blood. But when he disconnected it to flush it back, because I'm like, how did air get in the cannula backwards? It had to have been trained it in. But when he disconnected it to fill it and then refill the line and reconnect it, nothing would come back. Nothing. He bent to put it down. Nothing would come out. Nothing. Nothing. Not one drop of blood. Pushed on it a little bit. Not one drop of blood. And we know the left atrium was open. The left atrium was wide open. So the air went atrium, through the mitral, up in the ventricle, out the valve, all the way up and out. That is the only way that happened. So it's a good question. But we still had the atrium open. So when we went back on bypass, I flowed, and eventually the heart did fill back up again. The heart filled back up with blood. They were able to de-air it. But I just was sure. The brain's got to be. This patient's dead. There's no way this patient's got. I was shocked that the heart started. I couldn't believe it, but it did. Anyway, it worked out. If you have any other questions about it, please feel free to ask. Let's get on to the next one. The perfect circuit change out. But why is this patient's pressure plummeting? That's my last case, near miss. So it's an ECMO patient. They were on VV ECMO with I think they were dual cannula, one femoral vein into the right IJ. In fact, I'm pretty sure that's what it was. We had planned a circuit change. There was one of our per diems was on shift that night. I love her dearly. She's great. I would love for her to work with us permanently. I wish if you're watching, I would like for you to really think about that. In order to change it, we got a second ECMO circuit on a second pump. So we used the LivaNova SCPC, is what we use. And then we use the, our ECMO circuit has the EOS or EOS, whatever you call it, oxygenator on it. But I think this particular time we weren't using Quadrex, we were using Inspire on it, and they would last, somewhere between depending. You can't use propofol because it's polypropylene fiber, so you can't use that. Or if they have severe hyperlipidemia, that's a problem also. But we were using, I think that's what we were using, and they'd last about 7 days, sometimes 10 days. But at the time, we weren't keeping patients on ECMO for several weeks to months. We got everything prepped and draped and all that stuff. We set a plan. I'm going to clamp, cut, connect. That pretty routine methodology. And then reestablish flow. And we did all of that. We did one thing after another, and everything worked out great. So as soon as we reinitiated ECMO, the pressure starts to drop fairly quickly and then fairly dramatically. And the pulse ox went, bleep, 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 bleep. That descending tone. And then the patient became bradycardic. Somebody in the room, one of the nurses, said, he's going to code. And I looked up and I said, and this is for the sake of, do we get dinged if we say bad words? And I said, oh, shit. Okay. So it was an oh, shit. That was probably better than what I could have said. But that is what I said. I remember this very, very well. So what happened? So here is our ECMO circuit. And this is how our ECMO circuit normally runs. We have our access line coming from the bed, going here into our centrifugal cone, comes out, and it goes into right here, comes up, goes into our oxygenator, all right? Goes through our oxygenator and exits here through our flow probe, and then goes back into up the bed and on into the patient, whether it be in the IJ or femoral arterial or whatever, it doesn't matter. Cannulation has nothing to do with how this basic circuit is designed and how this works. Now here we have a recirculation line. This is the EOS oxygenator. Inspire, just it looks a little different, but it works the same. Comes up, and we put that there so it won't get kinked off. It comes down, and it's basically getting reintroduced into the access line of this line. So you can't see it. It's behind the bed, but I can show it to you a little on the next image. But trust me, it's there. And then here we have a CRRT circuit hooked up. So there is our access. And our return is probably down here, again, where you can't see it, going back to the CRRT machine. And that's going to be over in this side. But that's our basic circuit. That's what it sort of looks like. Now, here we can look at it without it being on the pump. But basically, here you have, this would be coming from the patient. Here it is right here, going into the centrifugal cone, out of the cone, into the oxygenator, out of the oxygenator, and eventually making its way back up the arterial line. I think I might have a better picture of it. Let me see. I really don't. But it doesn't matter. The point, all of that doesn't really make any difference. That doesn't even affect this. What affects this lecture is what I'm going to show you right here. This recirculation line. This line that you see right here, this line, is the same as this line that you're looking at right here that's going back around. That's where you put it while you're operational. But for priming purposes, it comes out of the top of the oxygenator, just like you see it coming out of the top of the oxygenator here, and it goes back up to our priming bag, and that way we can get the air purged out of the system when we prime it. That's the part that's really important for you to be looking at here today. And if you notice, it has a one-way valve right here and arrows pointing with which way their flow is going to go, okay? And this is, again, our priming bag. So what actually happened? So what happened was when we got the other circuit, it looked just like this one does right now. And when we reinitiated ECMO, this bag that you see here started filling up with the patient's blood. And as it kept filling, the patient's pressure kept going down. And of course, they're both together, the two pumps, it's jumbled, you can't see it very well. And by the time we got to he's going to code, and oh shit, this bag looked like a wood tick. It was nice, big, juicy, and swollen, and full of the patient's blood volume. So now what am I going to do? Well, I thought about it, and I was like, okay, I've got to get the blood from the bag, which is now no longer connected, right? Because the bag is not connected because the lines are connected. It's just a bag sitting there with these lines disconnected going up to the patient. So I'm like, can I take this line and hook it up to the negative pressure access line and drain it all back out? No, I can't do that because there's a one-way valve. So I took this line off, turned it. Here's what I did. I turned this off right here to the off position. I disconnected the line, moved it up to the top of the bag, took the line from the top of the bag and hooked it up to my venous access line here. There's a port down here that you just can't see, but trust me, it's there, and it's on the negative pressure. I put a clamp on the line after that connector, opened the stopcock, took the bag off of here, turned the bag upside down, and turned on the RPMs really high. And the patient went from bradycardic and bloop, bloop, bloop. Well, it was bloop, 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 bloop. And I got all of the volume back in the patient, and that patient also survived. But that bag was chock-a-block full. It was tight. It looked like a wood tick. Thank God it didn't tear, rupture, or anything else, and that we had a way of doing that. So again, another issue. What did I learn from the experience? Well, learned the same thing I learned the last time, which is when you're working with other people, you really all have to be on the same page, because when you're working with other people, this is one of the, I think it's one of the biggest problems that we have in this industry when you start talking about having two perfusionists on cases, which is just not sensible at all. It makes no sense. That's like saying you need a second cardiac surgeon, a second anesthesiologist to second guess each other's decisions. It just doesn't make sense. But the part that's really the problem is that you assume the other person did it. That's what really happens in these circumstances, is you're not doing it yourself, And so they're doing it. And you think it got done, but it didn't get done on a person that doesn't normally work there. So, because they're per diem folks, so they normally don't prime them. And I didn't remember to move the thing down. But if I was working alone independently, I probably wouldn't. I don't think I would have made the same mistake. I think it has to do with not thinking through the situation. So that was my last event. I think we're ending a little early, which I hope everybody will be okay with. We usually go over a lot of the time, and I'll probably end up going over tomorrow to make up for it, but you don't lose credits. But the board doesn't like it when you do that, but I can't help it. I went faster than I expected to go. Probably because I was talking faster than usual and maybe a little over anxious. But all of the material was there, so you'll get full credit. And then I'll make up for it by going over on some of our other ones, because when you go over, the board doesn't give you additional credit. When you go under, you don't lose any credit. But again, I apologize for finishing a little early, but I am finishing early. And I'm going to take a break for a minute and then go to the hospital and cover my ECMO shift. But I would love to hear from you guys. Please be sure, if you don't mind, to go on these social media sites. And if you think I'm worth it, if you think I did a good job, if you think this was a good lecture, share it, like it, give it the thumbs up, do whatever it is, give us, ask for notifications for when we do programs. We've got PerfWeb 100, which I am planning. We have our ECMO specialist course. Please check it out. Look at it. We have our app. We have our podcasts. We have so many cool things going on. And you know what? Anyone out there in the internets and the interwebs that has an interest, please reach out to me. Become a part of our program in some way. We would love to have you. We would love to have some interesting cases, your experience. Maybe you have a near miss you would like to discuss. I think it's where we really, really, really learn. We chose near misses because all of these patients ultimately did fine. All of these patients that I described to you did not have a bad outcome. And for full disclosure, thank you, Lord, I have never had a situation where I have been the proximate cause of the patient's demise. And so I do appreciate that God has looked out for me all these years through my 45 years of clinical practice, with a few more to go. Probably not going to make it to 50 years. I'm probably going to do somewhere around 48. But Gary Cornelius, probably one of the most fascinating guys, used to work at Methodist down at the old Fondren OR, Methodist DeBakey Heart and Vascular in Houston, in the medical center in Houston. He, thank you. Have a great shift. Thank you so much, Francis. He worked clinically for 50 years, and he actually did the procedure that the artificial heart transplant or artificial heart implantation that Cooley did back in the 70s that caused the big fight between him and Dr. DeBakey. Gary actually worked for both DeBakey and Cooley and was there during that case. He's never been willing to come on and discuss it. I know Dr. DeBakey's family would not want that. I think that's part of the reason. He has a lot of political sensitivity, which I could completely understand. He had a good relationship with everybody. But it's a fascinating story and how all that played out. I know the story from having visited with and talked to him. Maybe one day he will. I don't know. But it is a fascinating story to hear that from somebody who was physically in the room at the time that actually occurred, doing the case. It's really interesting. Okay. With that said, PerfWeb 100, I'm working on it. I'm going to do something really special for everybody. Tomorrow, 4 p.m., Magic is reminding me, thank you, 4 p.m. tomorrow, we're going to have an ECMO circuit in here. I'm going to have that priming bag in here. I can even show you what I did if you come back tomorrow, I can actually show you how that works and how I did that. Because I'm going to use the priming bag tomorrow as my simulated patient in order to make the ECMO work and the CRRT machine work. So I'm going to have both of those here. We'll have the camera set up. It'll be a very I think, informative, instructive simulation lecture. I'm going to do a little CRRT lecture in advance and kind of talk about CRRT from the critical care side, but you can take that information and you can use it intraoperatively to maybe use Z-BUF with the appropriate fluid in a way that I think really will benefit your patients. So that's something to take into consideration there. With that said, I will talk to you all tomorrow at 4 p.m. Look for our announcement for PerfWeb 100. I told you we're going to do something really special. And Francis, I need you to send us an email with your physical address, because you have been, and you know what, and Kevin, Ahmad, Derek, all of you guys, Michael, all of you guys that come here and watch this program, you're always consistently coming here and watching this program. And I appreciate you guys so very much. Francis, you get a special prize, okay, because you did answer the questions and you were a strong participator. But everybody else that was involved in the program today, if you hear this message, send me, and Mike, Magic, you even answered the thing right. TMP, you did get that right. So you get a special prize. So send me an email. I need your physical addresses, and we're going to send you something. Now, if you're out of the country, you're getting a downloadable something, gift card, whatever it may be. I can't physically send out of the country. It just costs too much money. It's insane. But if you're in the United States, you're going to get a package. Send me that information. Y'all be safe. Good seeing you. Talk to you soon tomorrow.